Hey everybody, good morning or good evening if you're joining us from Canada, and thank you everybody for joining us today. My name is Stephen Dillon from the playing field, and also joined today by Jose Figuera, who's also a key part of the project as well. First of all, thank you for those that are tuning in and that have registered to join us today for our Coach and Focus session with Katie Barrett. Now, for those that are here in New Zealand, everyone will be familiar with Katie from a lot of experiences from local football. And for those that are joining us in Canada, of which there are many that are registered, again, you'll be more familiar with Katie from her time at Halifax Tides currently. So very excited to have Katie on the call today, and having known Katie for as long as I have, it's great to have you here, Katie, and I sure appreciate your time with us and with the coaches. For those that are listening, again, what we typically do is have 35 to 40 minutes of presentation. And then for those that are joining us live on the webinar, there's then, of course, an opportunity to interact and ask questions about some of the content as well. So a great opportunity for you all. Now, before we kick off, we've had 4 webinars so far in the last 6 weeks, and they've been really well received. We do have others coming up. Katie is the first Kiwi-born guest that we've had on this stretch of webinars, which is amazing. But the second Canadian-based after Alan Koch, who was with us a few weeks ago as well. So yeah, another first for you, Katie, and say welcome on behalf of the group. And we really do appreciate your time in talking through your journey today from local football to professional football in Canada. So yeah, over to you.
Thank you, Stephen. Tēnā koutou katoa, ko Katie ahau, no pauna ki ahau, ko mā tairangi toku manga, ko te whanganui a tara toku e makura awa, he Pākehā ahau no Aotearoa. He tēnā koa noku ki te mihi ki a koutou I tēnei rā, ngā mihi nui ki a koutou katoa. Hello everyone, and thank you, Stephen, for the warm welcome. As mentioned, and as you probably know if you signed up for this webinar, my name is Katie, and although I'm delivering this webinar from Canada, it would feel wrong not to acknowledge where I'm from. So Wellington's the place I call home, and I mean the longer you spend away from somewhere, the more you kind of realize where your heart really lies. I grew up there for most of my life. Places like Mount Victoria, Te Whanganui Tara, and Macra Beach are places where I feel a real sense of belonging. And I'm a New Zealand citizen, but also a US citizen. And it's really special to be here with all of you today. And so thanks again for having me. Just before I get into, I'll just make sure this actually goes. Before I get into the presentation, I just thought I'd cover what I'll go over while I have this time with you. So firstly, my journey over the last 5 years especially has been pretty sporadic, but also one that I'm really grateful for. So I'll start with a brief insight into that journey just to give you some context around how I got where I am today. Then after that, I'll talk a little bit about moving abroad and the transition into Halifax, the role of the first assistant coach, my reflections on year 1, as well as the off season and what we're looking forward to in year 2. As well as that, I'll talk about some gender-related challenges that I've experienced. That's a really important part of day-to-day reality. And then I'll finish with just a few key messages that I've learned along the way and taken away from my journey so far. So this is my journey. As you can tell, clip art and those sorts of skills aren't necessarily my strength, but I thought it was really important to highlight some key stops along the way that I've had in my journey. I started coaching while I was playing at Capital Football. So right at the left there is the Capital Football Federation in Wellington. I've been a part of that federation since I was about 14 as a National Women's League player. So it's always been a really important environment for me. During that time, as I was kind of entering my last year of high school, it was actually Emma Evans from Capital Football who first got me into coaching some of the national age group squads. So I have to give her a shout out. She'd be very disappointed if I didn't. But she did play a big role in getting me started. And around that time, or a few years after being involved kind of in the FTC programs, I had a chance to complete a female-only C license whilst I was also starting my university studies. This was my first step into formal coach education, and Stephen was actually one of the educators on that course. But I remember leaving that experience just feeling really inspired about the detail and the process behind coaching. To be completely honest, up until then, I probably coached more like a team captain, relying on just the feel of the game and my experience. But that was the first time I really saw coaching as something structured and intentional. So like I mentioned, at the same time, I was completing a Bachelor of Education, and originally the plan was to move into teaching. So I was doing that degree and then picked up a role at a local club in New Zealand called Waterside Karori. Within that, I started building a little bit of a girls program at the club, as well as coaching sessions within the mixed space, so boys and girls. At the same time, I was still doing capital football opportunities, and I just tried to say yes to as many opportunities that I could. And then I was offered a role full-time at Capital Football when I approached the end of my Bachelor of Education, and I started working full-time there. It wasn't actually where I saw myself long-term, but it was an ability for me to work in the sport and develop coaches and programs, which was a really valuable experience. I think finding full-time roles in coaching, particularly as a woman, was something that was really hard, and I didn't even know if it was possible. So that's kind of where my first journey started. And then I also began my B license diploma during that time as well. But while I was at Capital Football, I started coaching within the Wellington Phoenix. They'd started a partnership program with Capital Football, working with the girls team multiple times a week. And that's the moment for me where I can really say things began to shift. Working consistently with a team as opposed to running sessions made me realize how much I loved coaching in a high performance environment, and that I wanted to do more of it. So after about a year, I was actually given the opportunity to move into a full-time role with the Wellington Phoenix, and that was a big step forward for me. There I spent about 3.5 years, and I'll talk about my time there shortly, whilst continuing to go through the process of my B license. And then towards the end of my time there, that's when I started my A license. And I also then was starting to become really aware that I was ready for a new challenge. And if I'm being honest, across all of this journey, I was probably becoming a bit of a big fish in a small pond. And I wanted to test myself in different environments. At the same time, though, opportunities for full-time coaching, like I mentioned, in New Zealand, particularly in the women's game, were still very limited. So I knew that going abroad was something I needed to explore, and I wanted to do. I also think it's really important to just acknowledge the timing of my coaching career, and the fact that I was somewhat fortunate. There were a lot of women before me who had broken down barriers and created opportunities that I was then able to step into. So I kind of grew up in the high performance pathway at a time when the women's game was developing, and I'm just really grateful for that. But then when I left the Wellington Phoenix, I began traveling with my partner for about 6 months, and then spent a period of time looking for my next role without really knowing where I was going to end up. And eventually that process led me to where I am today at the Halifax Tides, which I'll go into a bit more detail shortly. So that's a quick snapshot into my journey and some of the key moments that shaped it. But before I get into my time at the Halifax Tides, I do think it's really important just to acknowledge my time at the Wellington Phoenix. Without this part of my journey, I know that I wouldn't be the coach that I am today, and I likely wouldn't have had the opportunities that followed. So like I mentioned, I was there for 3.5 years across 4 academy cycle years. In year 1, I was coaching under 15 girls while still working full-time as a Federation Development Officer, as mentioned. So sport was my career, but coaching was very much a passion happening on the side. But it was my first real experience of working consistently with a team, like I mentioned, and I started to understand what it meant to build something over time. Year 2 was similar. That team then, though, competed in what was called the Girls National Youth League at the time, under Capital Football. That was my first true exposure to a more performance-based environment. You know, you had a league and you were preparing for a game, reviewing a game, preparing for the next game. So for me, it was about creating excitement around planning towards competition, as well as balancing development and results. But year 3 is kind of where the biggest shift happened, and where a lot of things changed for me. That's when I moved into full-time role with the Wellington Phoenix, and kudos to the club for, you know, really investing in the women's game and trying to match what the boys' academy had been offering. So we went into a fully fledged full academy with the A-League Women Reserves, an under-18 girls and an under-16 girls. And I guess my full-time role was looking after all of those teams, but from a coaching perspective, I initially was working with the under-16 girls and then assisting Paul Temple at the time with the A-League Women's Reserves. Obviously, partway through that year, he was promoted into the women's first team coaching role. So I took over the A-League Women's Reserve squad. That was a really pivotal moment for me because I was now not just coaching a youth development team and making people fall in love with football and become ambitious, but I was working with some of the best young players in the country, coaching multiple times a week and starting to experience what first team football looks like. During that time also, I coached in the National Women's League, for those of you that are familiar with the New Zealand pathway. And I got to share a desk with the A-League men's reserves coach, which you all would know as Chris Greenacre. And during that time, I really grew just massively because of him. And we were able to pick each other's brains and laugh together and learn about processes together. And I'm just really grateful for that time because I think it really sped up my growth in a really short period of time. And I guess a big thing that I started to learn with A-League Women's Reserves is how to layer in a first team game model into your own team. It's obviously a really important part of being in a professional club, but doing it in a way that's still authentically you, that you understand what you're delivering, why you're delivering it, and what you want it to look like. It was also an opportunity for me to manage staff. So I had an analyst and support staff around me, strength and conditioning, physios. So it was a really good learning opportunity for me to get a bit more insight into what was a lot closer to the professional game. Then in year 4, I was only there for a short period of time before I left, but I continued to do the same role whilst taking the reserves team. But then it was time for me to go. It was a really hard decision to leave, but at that point, I just felt really proud of what we'd built as a club and the role that I'd played in that. But I also knew I was ready for a new challenge, like I mentioned. The Phoenix is a club that will always feel like a bit of a home to me, if I'm honest. But I also felt like I'd taken that environment as far as I could at that stage, and I needed to step into something new. So although it was a hard goodbye, I knew it was the right thing for me and where I was going to go next. So then I began the job search eventually. So as I mentioned, I didn't take the typical route when it came to finding a job abroad. I left my role without having anything lined up and traveled for a period of time and then started applying, not really knowing where I wanted to end up. So I just thought it was an important piece to touch on because I learned so much in that process. And I think sometimes when you're in New Zealand or comfortable in your environment, it can feel like you don't even know where to start. So I'm just here sharing what I wish I knew a little bit more if I were to do it all again. Yeah. So the first thing is applying and interviewing. I got to a point where I was applying for a lot of different roles, and I stopped trying to decide whether something was too big or too small to apply for, and I just gave everything an equal opportunity. And that meant a lot of applications, a lot of cover letters, and a lot of interviews as well. And what that meant for me is I just got better and better as it went on. All of the stuff clubs were looking for was an opportunity to improve what I was doing, but also just improve through repetition. The second thing is around managing emotions. So if I'm being honest, like there was a lot of rejection across applying and interviewing. Like it would be naive of me to not to say that it was easy to just find a new role kind of out of nowhere in the big bad world. But so there was a lot of times where I didn't even hear back at all, and I wondered if this was the right path for me and if I made the wrong choice. There were moments where I get to later stages as well and feel really happy and confident and still not get the role. So I think learning how to stay neutral during that period was really important. Not letting the highs get too high or the lows get too low, and just continuing to show up and do the work. Another big one, and I've tried to include a few on there for you, was just understanding where to find opportunities and the platforms that you need to find them. There's not a huge number of jobs in football, and finding them isn't always straightforward, especially in the women's game. And I learnt that during my time looking for roles. So I spent time learning what platforms to use. You know, there's a lot of good websites, jobs in football, jobs for football, teamwork online. All of those platforms were really important for me. So I was able to sign up for different networks and just try and stay connected as possible to what was out there abroad. Upskilling and using tools to your advantage was also really important. At the Phoenix, I was really lucky to have great people around me, which sometimes meant I didn't realize what I didn't know. For example, I didn't use certain tools like sports code and other analysis tools because I was privileged enough to have an analyst. But when I started interviewing, I began to realize how important those skills were. So I spent a lot of time during my off period, or my sabbatical, I could call it, learning from others and asking questions, building knowledge in those areas. I also took this time to go on a whim and learn a new language that turned into learning Japanese for a year now and being able to communicate with our Japanese international. So it just goes to show that learning for the sake of learning and upskilling will always end up serving you wherever you go, even if you don't know the destination just yet. And finally, just knowing who you are. So for me, that comes back to my values, which at the bottom is the slide I like to use that sums it up, but to love people, to look after people, and to laugh with people. I think when you're clear on who you are, and a lot of interviews help that, you're able to show up in a good way in all of your interviews, and it also helps you recognize whether a role is right for you. Does the role align with your values? Because interviews are a two-way process. I did just want to touch on the using tools to your advantage, though. This is something I've become pretty passionate about. But one thing that really helped me during this time looking for work abroad was using the tools that I'd built through my coaching journey. And in particular, my A license became incredibly valuable. So I went to the first part of my A license at the start of the year that I left the Wellington Phoenix. I went to part 1 for the week, and then I knew that I was going to be leaving the Phoenix and going overseas. So New Zealand football were really accommodating, but essentially I had to do all the distance learning tasks as everyone else did, and then would do part 3 remotely. I was leaving in May and the course was in February. So those that have done any coaching licenses know that's a big body of work to get done. I wanted it done before I traveled for obvious reasons. So it was a lot of work, and doing all of that alongside full-time work was a lot, but looking back, it gave me a huge amount of content and confidence going into job interviews later. And this slide is just an example of what I had available. So obviously my playing model was very well developed at this point, and I had video and detail behind it that I could talk to confidently. I had session plans and curriculum blocks that showed how I structured my weeks and my programs. Analysis and review structure, that was a task we had to do with the A license, and I was maybe lucky enough that I had school kids as my team, so we had to often record presentations and send them out. So being able to have that kind of in my files to show people my review processes and my analysis structure was really valuable. And then obviously the session delivery and being able to show people yourself on the grass, I think, is really important. So the reason I bring this up is that I just think it's really important that when you go into interviews, you don't start from scratch. And I already had evidence of how I work and how I think and what I can deliver. So I found that really useful. And I just think it's important to highlight, because sometimes I think we can go into coaching courses and feel like the distance learning tasks are a little bit of a tick box exercise. But I do think if you take them seriously and invest in them, they become tools that you can use in real environments, whether that's in an interview or just your day-to-day coaching. But for me, that work seriously paid off, both in helping me get opportunities and helping me be more confident in the coach that I am. So this role eventually led me to the Halifax Tides, or that process, sorry, eventually led me to my role with the Halifax Tides. Before I go into the role itself, I just think it's really helpful to give a bit of context around the environment. So the Northern Super League, for those of you that don't know, is a new professional women's league in Canada. This will be the second year of the league. It's a 6-team league. You play 5 rounds of pool play and then playoffs. It's a fully professional league with 12-month-long contracts, 55K minimum salary contracts, and it's growing really quickly. And to be honest, I was a little bit surprised that a country like Canada, with the success they've had internationally, didn't have a professional league, but that also meant that there was an opportunity for me. And my partner and I had already been looking into Canada as a potential destination. Culturally, it felt somewhat similar to New Zealand, and the fact that it was a new league meant that there was a chance to be part of something from the beginning, which I think if I look back on my career, that's kind of the way I've done things a lot of the time. So it was really exciting in that aspect. I was in contact with a few different organizations, but ultimately the Halifax Tides offered me the role, and everything happened pretty quickly from there. So I moved over almost immediately with my partner, and that's just a lovely map of Canada to show you firstly how big it is, and Halifax is right there all the way across on the east coast. So for being a girl from New Zealand, the fact that a country is that big was pretty daunting to me, if I'm honest. But Halifax was actually somewhere we'd been drawn to before the role had come up. It reminded us a lot of home, being by the water and having that similar feel to Wellington. Made the decision and the transition a lot easier. These photos just show, I just think it's really fun. They show the Halifax Harbour on the top and then the Wellington Harbour down the bottom. For me, that connection just really helped me settle in. But with the change, with that move came a lot of change. So firstly, the career change. From a football perspective, one of the biggest shifts was moving from youth to senior players. I'd had some exposure before, but this was the first time working with a full group of professionals, many of whom were around my age or had significant playing experience, significantly more playing experience than players I'd worked with before. Some had over 100 international caps, so that was a big shift for me. But what I realized pretty quickly is that people are people, whether they're youth or senior. Senior players still want to improve. They still want clarity. They still want connection. And in some ways, it's actually less complex because they know who they are and what they need. But the big difference is that they also want to win because it's their career. Another big change was the demands of the environment. Travel was a huge one. So as you can see, Canada's geographically massive. So away games involve long flights, time zone changes, and a lot of logistics, which was really new to me. I was used to getting in my car and driving 20, 25 minutes to whatever fixture was on. So that was a big new thing for me that I'm grateful for and have learned a lot from. The way we measure success is different. Like in academy football, you're just focused on development. But in senior football, yes, you still care about development, but ultimately you need to win games and you have owners, fans, expectations. So there's a different level of pressure attached to performance. And I also transitioned back into an assistant coach role after spending some time as a head coach. And that was just another shift and change, but the right one for where I was at in my career. And then outside of football, there's the reality of moving to a new country. So one of the biggest things for me was trying to find my people as quickly as possible. Obviously, you start within the club, building relationships across all departments, because those connections help you settle both professionally and personally. I also found it really important to just appreciate where my feet were and not worrying too much about what's next or how long I'll be here, but just focusing on doing the best job I can in the present. Whether it's people, places, or routines, those things make a big difference when you're away, in terms of finding reminders of home. Like I would be lying if I said it was really easy to move to a new country and just smooth sailing, but there are times where you miss home, and I think those that live in New Zealand are very lucky people. So yeah, finding as many things in your new home that remind you of your old home will really help you when there's days that are hard. And then obviously navigating new pathways. I was pretty familiar with the New Zealand football pathway, but the Canada soccer pathway is something different, and I have to be able to navigate that, understand it, and talk to as many people as I can to make sure that I have understanding on how it works so that it can better off our team and our recruitment. So just going through the role of the first assistant, obviously every environment is slightly different, but this is, I guess, a really simple form of what our structure looks like. At the top, we obviously have the head coach, and he's the person ultimately responsible for performance. But I sit underneath that as the first assistant. Then we also this year have a second assistant, a goalkeeper coach, analyst, assistant coach, performance coach, athletic therapist, and it goes along with other operation staff and our internal support team as well. So there's a lot of moving parts, as you can see. And my role, I guess, in some ways sits across all of that. In the simplest way I try to describe it to myself is bridge, glue, and support. So how do I bridge the gaps between all of these parties, as well as bridging the gap between the head coach and the playing group, both from the playing group up and from the head coach down? How do I glue everyone together and make the team cohesive? And then how do I support different departments to make sure we get the best out of the team? Ultimately, I'm there to support the head coach so that he can do what he does best, which is deliver on the grass and help us win games. And so that means filtering information and taking in detail from staff, and bringing up and down what's the most important. But for me, I guess I break it up into smaller bits. There's kind of 4 key things that are important. First and foremost, it's connection with players. Because at the end of the day, everything we do as staff is about helping players perform. And if players feel connected and clear, supported, you give yourself the best chance of success. I firmly believe one of my superpowers is being able to connect with people. So I think being able to use that skill to connect with players and make sure that they feel valued is something that I really take a lot of responsibility for. And I find that I have to really focus on doing that because it's going to help our team succeed. On top of that is connection with staff. Obviously, there's a lot of different departments in football, as you all know, and it's really easy for those departments to become quite siloed. So I take a lot of pride in trying to build relationships across all areas and try and create a really collaborative environment, because it takes a village to run a professional soccer club. So we need to do our best at bringing everyone's ideas forward, and finding the best ideas to lead with clarity and make sure that the team win games. Another big part of my role is obviously delivering the game model. I spend a lot of time on the grass running sessions and delivering blocks for the head coach. And so in that moment, it's really just about understanding exactly what he wants delivered and then doing it in a way that delivers the key objectives that he has. And this is something I really enjoy and something I've developed a lot in my time at Halifax Tides. And I think it's important to just acknowledge that assistant coaching looks different in every environment. I've kind of done every single role as an assistant coach. I've been just the friend. I've been the cone picker-upper. I've been just, behind the scenes. And in this environment, I am on the grass a lot, and I find it really valuable for my development just to have another type of experience. And finally, I think it goes without saying that I take a lot of pride in being part of women's sport. So being able to support and showcase female athletes, and I guess help create an environment where they can perform and be ambitious is something that I take really seriously. Coming to Canada, I've been like massively blown away by the support for women's sport, the crowds, the engagement, the investment, and being part of that and helping contribute to that is something I find really meaningful. So that kind of sums up, I guess, the role itself. Obviously, your role's forever evolving and you're trying to be better at what you do every day, but that's kind of the simplest way to sum it up. But for me in year one last year, there was kind of 3 pivotal moments that I took away some key lessons. It was my first year in the professional game, and it was a challenging season, but it was also one where I learned a huge amount. So the first one is our first club win. So if you followed our season, you'll know that it was a pretty tough year last year for us. We finished bottom of the table, and that's not where we had our expectations at. And we all know like losing is really hard and no one enjoys it. But in the middle of that season, we did have our first win, and it was after a number of close games. And for me, it sounds cheesy, but that was a really pivotal moment. Because it showed me what the importance of connection was. And even though we had such a difficult season, we stayed together, we stayed connected. And to see the players celebrate that moment, to see homegrown players play professional football on home soil in front of their family and friends, to see the crowd behind us, like that's just really a moment that hits you and tells you why you do what you do. It also made me fall in love with football again in a different way. And I think it's important to acknowledge what role the fans played in that. The support that we had every week, regardless of results, was incredible. To be able to give something back to them in that moment was really special. And lastly, it just taught me the importance of staying humble. We didn't win another game for another month, and I think it's just a really good lesson to celebrate the highs, but don't get carried away. And because the next game's always coming, and you've got to, keep your head down, working hard. The next pivotal moment for me was a coaching change mid-season. So if you followed the team, the club decided to go in a different direction mid-season, and during that period, I had to become a pretty important piece in holding things together from a technical staff perspective, whilst the club did a really good job of searching for the next head coach and finalizing those next steps. So for me, that was really about stepping up and making sure that the players felt stable, supported, and confident in what we were doing. Even if there's uncertainty internally, your job is to create clarity, and that was something really important during that time. And it was also a moment for reflection. So looking at my own processes, making sure I was contributing in the right way for the club and showing my value to the team and the environment. And lastly, when the new head coach came in, it was about building that relationship really quickly. We were in the middle of the season, and I had to build trust, share information, align on ideas. And that experience taught me a lot about leadership, even when you're not the head coach. But I think being a leader in whatever role you play is always going to help the organization do well. And being able to, although that was a really hard time for everyone during that season, it was a moment where I've grown a lot and I can look back on and see some really key lessons that I'll take away forever. And the last pivotal moment, and one I want to talk about, is the time where I stepped in as the interim head coach. So when our new head coach started, there was already going to be a period of time where he was away. So I was there to step in. It was just a short period, like a match day -3 onwards leading into a game, but it was a really significant opportunity for me. But really the approach in that moment is just to stay as authentic as you can. You don't need to try to be someone different. But you do need to recognize the responsibility of the role that you're taking on. But it was really important that I made sure players felt consistency, as well as clarity in decision making. And one of the biggest differences that I felt, instead of being an assistant coach and being the head coach for that period of time, was just ownership. I think as an assistant, you contribute to decisions, but as a head coach, you make them and you own them. In that game, it was decided by all of the staff prior to departing, the head coach departing, that we'd have 6 changes to the starting lineup. So that meant 12 conversations for me. So 6 players coming in and 6 coming out. And that was just a really valuable experience of having honest, clear conversations and supporting players, but also being direct. And I was able to appreciate how that's a huge part of that role. It also taught me the importance of staying calm. When you're the one making decisions, your energy is everything, and it really sets the tone. We had a last-minute injury withdrawal, like a minute before kickoff, and some decisions didn't go our way, and it was really important that I kept a calm head and made decisions with clarity and confidence. And on a personal level, I was just really proud. I was told leading into the game that I was the first New Zealand-born female to coach a professional team, and that's something that I'll always carry with me. There can only be one first person to do it, so I feel like really special to wear that. But at the same time, there was like a little bit of perspective there of, like, I know that there are so many coaches back home in New Zealand who are capable of doing this. And so for me, it's something I'm proud of for sure, but it's also something I hope becomes more common. So that's year 1. And obviously after finishing bottom of the table, we had to look really honestly at ourselves as a club. That's not where we wanted to be, and it was clear that changes were needed. So for me, that meant a really busy off season. I stayed working alongside the head coach and sporting director. We essentially went through a full squad rebuild. We have a roster of up to 25 players, and we retained 11 from the previous season, which meant we had around 14 spots, give or take, to fill. Another factor was the international spots. So we had 2 internationals remaining in a further 6 spots. We also wanted to make sure that we had positional depth and variation so that we could give different looks in different tactical scenarios, which is something we felt we lacked the year prior. Then once we started getting closer, we kind of had some priority rankings of, which players we were targeting first in each position. So with that came film, watching a lot of film, using statistic platforms like Impact to be able to compare players and compare leagues, connecting with different agents and communications with different parties, and then position-specific, that's a tongue twister, position-specific searches once we really honed in on what roles we needed. This was like a huge learning experience for me. It's something I hadn't been heavily involved in before, and it gave me a much better understanding of how squads are built at a professional level. So now heading into year 2, we're currently in pre-season, about 8 weeks in, and our first game's on the 25th of April. So one of the biggest years this change, as I've mentioned, is the new squad. We've got the new squad makeup, but we also have a new staff. So we've retained some key staff, but our head coach, myself, the goalkeeper coach, and operations staff, but we've also brought in a number of new staff across coaching, performance, and medical. So in a lot of ways, it feels like a new group. But because of that, a big part of my role this preseason has been around building culture and connection, helping bring the group together, establishing values, and creating an environment where people just feel aligned and ready to perform. That's something I really enjoy, and something I think we have strong value in as Kiwis. Building a team culture is something that's really ingrained in high performance sport environments in New Zealand. So it's an area I feel really confident leading in. Another big difference this year is being part of the full preseason. Last year, I arrived just before the season had started, so I missed a lot of that initial build. And this year, being involved from the beginning, planning, building, aligning, has been a really valuable part of my development. We've also had some great experiences as a group already. We're fresh off the plane from a UK tour. We got back yesterday, where we played West Ham, Everton, and Portsmouth. And that was just a really good opportunity to test ourselves and build cohesion within the group. Now we're coming into the final stages, obviously, of preseason with one more game, exhibition match before our home openers. But the objectives are pretty clear. Focusing on delivering our best performance every week and continuing to align to our game model. And naturally, if we do that consistently, the results will follow and will be exactly where we need to be, which is the NSL champions. But I also think it's really important to acknowledge that it is year 2 for everyone. So players, staff, the league itself have grown. So while we've improved, so has everyone else. And that means there'll be new challenges. And for me, that's the exciting part, because there's still a lot of growth to come for the players, the staff, and the club as a whole. Just before I get into my final takeaways, I just wanted to touch on something that's really important to me, and that's representing wahine toa, or strong women in this space. I think it would be naive not to acknowledge the challenges that comes with being a female in the game. There are women on this call, but there's also probably people that are working in environments where bringing women into the space matters. So I think it's really important to speak to both. The first thing is overcoming the narrative of tokenism. I've heard myself, and I know others have heard, that women are given roles because clubs need a female. And that's a difficult thing to navigate, because not only have you worked hard to overcome a lot of barriers to get there, but you're now told that you might not deserve it anyways. And for me, the way I've managed that is by limiting the noise. If someone wants to believe I got a job because of my gender, they can, but I'm confident that my work will do the talking. And I also think it's important to recognize that being a woman is not a weakness, and it's a strength. And the perspective and the skills, the way I can connect, that adds values to a team environment. The second is imposter syndrome. So especially being young myself and stepping into new environments, it's easy to question sometimes whether you belong. But the biggest thing I've learned here is just to stay true to yourself and to not try to be someone bigger or louder than you are. I think you can be a good leader and be kind. And if you don't do that, you lose what actually got you your role in the first place. So it's just a reminder that you're in the room for a reason, and reminding yourself of that is really important. And if you work with people that experience imposter syndrome, I just ask that you help them understand that their value is just as important. And lastly, is around representation. And I guess I framed it as a way of, like, I am a coach that is female, not a female coach. And at times it can feel like you are representing more than just yourself. If I make a mistake, it can feel like it reflects on all female coaches. And I don't think that pressure exists in the same way in the men's game. But the way I try to frame that is be proud of the expectation, not pressured by it. And it's a privilege to be in these roles. And the reason these opportunities exist is because women bring value to the game, and we need more women in the game. And lastly, just remember whose opinion matters. You don't need to listen to everyone. Focus on the people that matter, your environment, your players, your support system, and just let the rest go. So before I open it up to questions, I just wanted to finish with a few key takeaways from my journey so far. It's been really nice to reflect on this. I was saying to Jose and Stephen before, and actually think about what I've learned along the way in the last 5 or 6 years. So the first thing is do things to a high standard and record and document your work. Not only does that make you better in the moment for doing it, but it also gives you something to show later. A lot of the opportunities I've had come from being able to demonstrate how I work, not just talk about it. The second thing is just be brave enough to be a small fish. I spent a lot of time in an environment where I was comfortable, and stepping out of that was really hard. But it's also where the most growth has happened for me. So don't be afraid to put yourself out in environments where you're challenged. Thirdly, find your people. Find those who support you, those that challenge you, and those that help you grow. Especially in performance environments where the focus is on results in the team, you sometimes have to be intentional about your own development. So finding opportunities where you can speak to people that are passionate about your growth has been something really important for me, and I still connect with a lot of mentors to make sure that I'm becoming better at what I do, as well as putting the team first. And also find people that you can laugh with. I think we take what we do seriously, and we should, but at the end of the day, it is still a game. Our coach always says we get to play a child's game, and he's absolutely right. And I think enjoying the environment you're in is just as important as performing in it. And I've said it a lot, but stay true to who you are. The more I've done that, the more I've enjoyed what I do, and the more the right opportunities have come my way. And lastly, just say yes, listen, and take note of everything you learn. Say yes to opportunities even when they feel uncomfortable. Apply for things you're not ready for, you think you're not ready for. Do things that might not feel like your perfect role, but will help you grow. And just listen to the people around you. Everyone has something to offer, regardless of their role or their experience. And the more open you are to learning, the more you'll take away from every environment you're in. So those are just a few things that have really shaped my journey so far. And just to finish off, I just want to leave you with something that really sums up everything to me, which is he aha te mea nui o te ao, he tangata, he tangata, he tangata. What's the most important thing in the world? It is the people, it is the people, it is the people. For me, that's been the center of my whole journey. I'm really grateful for everyone I've met through football and the connection I continue to build, because they're the people you spend all your time with in a very time-heavy job. So surround yourself with good people, look after the people around you, and don't be afraid to show you care. And I also think it's quite special that this moment comes full circle. Like Stephen was one of the first educators on my first C license when I was a university student, and now to be here sharing this space is a really nice reminder of how important connections are. So that's me, but I'll pass it over to Stephen and open it up for any questions. And I hope that there's something you've taken away for your own journey or for other coaches that work alongside you.
Kia ora, Katie, and thank you very much for sharing what is a phenomenal presentation, and as I say, a lot of the messages that you've shared there. I think the two things that really stand out for me are, one, the pride in which you talk with, not only about your journey, but also the impact that others have had on you. And then secondly, just the sincerity. I mean, what has been achieved in recent years is incredible. And as you mentioned, there are others that could do the same. But equally, you have done that and you've achieved that. So thank you very much for sharing with that one as well. Now, we do have 10 minutes left, so I do want to use this time for people to ask questions if they do have some, Katie, if that's okay. But whilst people are thinking, I just had one, which I'd like to just raise with you. And I guess it links like two of your pivotal moments that you mentioned. You mentioned the first one about being the coaching change, and then the second one about you then taking that interim role. And a phrase you used was about creating clarity. And I'm just intrigued as to how you or who you lent on when it came to creating that clarity. Like how did you go about in the chaos of an interim change, taking on this new role? Like how did you yourself create that calmness and create the clarity that allowed you to move forward?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think first it's really important to highlight like the other staff that were there during the time. I think we all stuck together incredibly well as a technical staff, but also the entire club. I never felt like I didn't have support. So I think, again, being in an environment where people want to look after you is going to be really important. But then also just being vulnerable to talk about what scares you, I think in those moments is massive, because it just helps you kind of unpack what's happening and then approach it with a bit more clarity. And then just, again, like that reminder of what we do is a pretty special job. So not taking it for granted and just not taking life too seriously, I think was really important in that moment, for sure.
Amazing. Thank you.
I'm going to jump in if that's okay, Katie. But yeah, thanks again. Yeah, awesome presentation. And yeah, again, I think one of your key values, and certainly it's a Kiwiana thing about leaving places better than when you found them. And you mentioned the Phoenix, and I think the progression that the club's made in the last couple of years, it's certainly down to obviously people like yourself that have left a really, really strong mark there, and I'm sure you'll do the same moving forward. So one thing that jumped out to me was when you were talking about the role of the first assistant, and I really like the slide about like the bridge, glue and support. And I wanted to kind of ask around maybe like the challenge part of it. So like that relationship with the head coach, I guess, including like the rest of the staff. But yeah, if you can kind of maybe like put a bit of a spotlight on, how it's been for you to maybe like challenge ideas that might not at first sit similar to you, how you might communicate that, and then what it kind of looks like. Because I think, in the professional game, that's a really, be a really good insight to kind of hear from someone living it.
Yeah, no, that's, I'm really fortunate that one of the first things our head coach told us is that he doesn't want a room of yes men. So I think already knowing that he was willing to be challenged I was really fortunate for that. Not everyone will be kind of that humble right from the get-go. But I think some of it actually comes down to dealing with that imposter syndrome, right? Like once I knew who I was and what value I had to add, I think that really that just helps you going into those conversations. So I know that my experience with ambitious female footballers is like, I've got a lot of experience in that, and I can bring that forward. And that's something that, is my specialty within the group. So I think coming from that place has been really helpful. But I think, again, like, if the team is at the focus of all of your ideas and decisions, you'll never come across poorly in how you deliver feedback. But I think it's just timing is a big lesson for me of like, when is the right time to bring forward ideas and how to deliver those. So I think, it's a big part of handling those conversations, but just doing it in a way that's authentically you and kind for the right reasons. At a time where things probably aren't too stressful for the gaffer, I think that's really important as well. Picking the right times to bring forward some new ideas. So yeah, that's kind of a way to kind of go roundabout to your question.
Awesome. That's cool.
Thank you. So if anyone, we did have a couple of questions. The first one was from Ren. So in terms of the platforms that you mentioned, so you had Jobs in Football. Were there a couple of others that you used? And again, maybe that's something you can share with the group after.
Yeah, I'm more than happy to share a few of them. So yeah, Jobs for Football, Jobs in Football, although those are a lot of the same jobs are posted on there. A real caveat to those is like some jobs are hidden behind a paywall, but so you do have to pay a small membership fee. So look, that's something I was willing to buy at the time. It's not crazy. I think it's like £1 for some of those. And then Teamwork Online is probably a really good NCAA, NWSL, USL, MLS kind of North America platform. But I think LinkedIn is like really where it's at for football at the moment. There's a lot of good resources and a lot of people these days that are just willing to share. So I think, that would be a great place to go as well. But I'm more than happy to send some of those platforms across.
Amazing. Now, Ali, if you don't mind, I know you're on the call. Ali's a colleague of Katie's at Halifax Tides. Ali, with your role, obviously, in the administration of the club, I mean, how exciting is it to have people like Katie involved in the on-the-field performance with these players? I mean, it must also make your job a lot easier.
I didn't think I'd get put on the spot today, Katie. I was here to be a supporter. But no, Katie and I spent a lot of time in the off season together. Like she said, she was busy. She spent a lot of time in the main office, not on the field. So we spent a lot of time together, and it's great to see when she puts all the hard work onto the field. And like she said, we kick off on Sunday with a preseason game here at home. So great to see what they've been working on throughout the whole season, where we really are two separate entities, business and sporting. It's nice to spend time together throughout the summer.
Amazing. Thank you, Ali. I think there might be a few more people from this side of the world tuning in as well. So that'll be really cool to see. We did have one more question, Katie, if that's okay, from Shane. Shane has been with us on a few other calls and is at the University of Guelph, which I know also you may be familiar with in Canada. It would be good for you to touch on in terms of your feedback. What's the best way to help like players, particularly in the Canadian market, like help them grow, like help make sure that their voice is heard? How do we continue to develop those players and support the players the best we can to get to the NSL level from a university?
Yeah, obviously, like that's a pathway that's still growing. Like last year, I think I would say majority of the Canadians that came into the league were already playing abroad and returning back to Canada. So now that that's kind of happened, how do we make sure that players are coming from the university system or the like national league, for lack of a better term? How do we make sure they progress into environments? So that's a really exciting part of this year. But I think a big thing that I've learned through my time, like especially at the Phoenix, where you're essentially doing that role, is like meeting players where they're at first and foremost. Like what are their ambitions and what are they looking forward to the most in their career? Like, are they ambitious? Do they need permission to be ambitious? I think is a really important part of female footballers. But this league is ultimately permission to be ambitious, right? Like it's a great opportunity. But I think around the feedback, one of the biggest joys in coaching female footballers, for those that do, is like they want so much to learn and to improve and to be better every day. And when you get a player that you can work with like that, like that's gold. Like it's amazing. So how can you provide them with as many tools in as many different ways that they need? So video is obviously a big one. Sometimes it's just a friendly conversation. I think there's so much power in conversation of how they're getting on with things. And then just having a real clear way of how you're going to track growth and feedback, I think would be really important. So I've been in environments before where we've had like an Excel sheet, just really simple, nothing pretty, but it's just logging every conversation that's formal or informal with players. So you have this real key log or diary of player feedback, I think would be a really good place to start. And then also like making sure that feedback is highlighting the good just as much as it is areas for improvement, I think is a big thing in the women's game, but especially in just young aspiring players, is if you've given them something to improve, like, and they do it, like celebrate that as much as you can and acknowledge it, as well as giving them areas to work on. And don't be afraid to like share them around. Like the more people that are in an athlete's corner for them and their development and their feedback, the better. Like we don't own players, so I think be comfortable with them seeking feedback from every direction, but also just try and hone it in right at the end and make it nice and clear for them.
Amazing. Thank you, Katie. My fear, as with all of these presentations, is that we could talk for hours. And again, knowing your experiences, we sure could. But just want to thank you, Katie, sincerely for your time and expertise and trust in being part of this today. And again, I'm sure that those that are tuning in afterwards on the recorded version will also have a lot of questions as well. And again, I'm hopeful there'll be an opportunity for people to connect and keep in touch. Talking on behalf of those that are here in New Zealand, of course, we're very proud of what you've done, and it's great to see the achievements that you have at Halifax. And I'm sure you've got a few more people that will be tuning in from this side of the world on your opening game, which will obviously support the team, but also grow the profile of the club on this side of the world as well. So we will be in touch with everybody that has tuned in and has registered with upcoming events. But for this one, again, Katie, thank you so much. We really do appreciate you and the time you've spent with us today.
Thank you for having me, and thanks everyone for tuning in, and feel free to reach out anytime.
Amazing. Thank you so much.